Welcome to That Japanese Thing. This is the fourth episode of the podcast, and today we're going to be talking about our first experience with a Japanese cultural item, such as anime, TV, maybe even karate or something. We're also going to be talking about several news items and just what we've been doing over the last week. So let's jump right in. Welcome. Today I'm with Yesh and Dylan. How are you guys?
Hi,
Hello.
we're doing well. How are you?
Doing fine. Doing fine.
Good.
Um, and yeah, I mean, it's a bit rainy today, obviously, so I hope that doesn't come through on the podcast. But yeah, other than that, it's been a pretty good week, I guess. So let's just jump into our news stories, I guess. First of
Yeah.
all, what do you have for us, Yesh?
So I wanted to bring to light that the Supreme Court case for the settlement of compensation for the Fukushima incident has finally completed. After some discussion between Tokyo Electric and the victims, approximately 1,400 people who had to be evacuated from the zone, has finally been completed. And the Supreme Court has determined that they deserve about 12.2 million USD in damages, after the company initially suggested a very much smaller number. However, the case is not completed yet, as now the plaintiffs are suing that the government should be involved with the payment. They don't want a bigger payout, but they want the government to contribute to the payout, because it was government safety reports that convinced people to stay in Fukushima during the earthquake warning prior to the incident.
Is that like the total for those? How many people was it?
Sorry, it's 3,700 people forced to evacuate.
1,700 forced to
This is
evacuate.
back in 2011, by the way,
Yeah, no,
just to bring
yeah,
up the time that this happened in.
I remember. Is that 12 million for like all of them or like individually or how's that?
12 million for all of them, plus also remember that the city itself gets a portion of that
Doesn't sound like very much when you break it up.
when you take that into account. Yeah,
Mm.
but on the other side of the coin, I don't want to sound like I'm minimizing things here, but the number of deaths and stuff was pretty much zero. From what I remember, everybody managed to get out. There weren't too many illnesses caused by it. And the people that went in to do the cleanup are actually the people
Yeah,
who suffered.
the main issue with Fukushima was the what do you call it? The spent fuel silo.
So they didn't have their storage facility properly, not sealed. It was properly sealed, but it wasn't safetied against earthquake damage.
Yeah, I mean it was up to standard, but I mean obviously an earthquake can destroy anything. So that's the
Well,
problem.
given enough strength, yeah. But Fukushima's in particular, it was made to a generic standard, not a standard for a place with earthquakes.
Yeah, I mean obviously it should be. I mean given how
Japan.
frequently Japan has earthquakes.
Yeah.
I
So
mean,
there was a lot of guilt sort of thrown about all over the place, but nobody has seen compensation yet because it's literally been passed from court to court until the Supreme Court eventually sat down on it.
it is weird that it took so long, given
11 years, yeah.
how public of an incident it is. I mean, it just even for like public relations, that they should have handled it much more quickly.
But we are talking about Japan, where paperwork must take a period of time or you are seen as rushing.
I mean, obviously, bureaucracy is more important than people, but maybe in certain circumstances, people could get move on.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I think the problem is you do have that sort of weird conservative kind of government impulse to do nothing, wait and see what the courts say
Mm.
at the moment in Japan. So
And the courts are terrified of making the wrong decision. It's such a public thing.
and Japanese courts are notoriously slow moving.
Exactly.
Probably some other issues behind the scenes there no one's really sure of. Yeah, I
Well,
mean,
at least it's not publicly reported, yeah.
And as you say, no one actually died of radiation poisoning or anything.
And
At
no
least,
one
at least in
prior to cleanup died
yeah,
of
at least in
radiation
the
poisoning.
general population. So
Mm.
probably that is a fair amount of compensation. Although like if you can't live in your house anymore, and it's like doesn't seem doesn't seem right.
Yes, yeah.
Possible.
It is crazy to consider the consequences these people are suffering. But I'm just more angry that an incident like this will make people antsy about nuclear power when nuclear power is something that could really help us. But because people are afraid of it, we don't research it. And without research, it will never be properly safe.
I'm generally in favor of nuclear power, except when Russians show up with tanks to
Yep.
nuclear power plants.
A different situation.
Yeah.
But yeah, not related. Not related to Japan. Anyway. All right. Moving on though. Dylan, what you got for us?
Yeah. So we have a sort of a interesting situation that's in the cyber realm. Kojima Industries Corporation suffered a cyber attack on the sometime on or before the 26th of February. And what this has done is it's created a knock-on effect because it halted their production. Now, Kojima Industries Corporations creates components for car manufacturing, and they're part of the greater Toyota group. So that disruption had a domino effect onto Toyota, and Toyota announced that they were going to shut down production lines in 14 plants on the 1st of March. That was Tuesday. So they lost about production for 13,000 vehicles, if the numbers are right.
Okay. I heard some other things as well that they were doing it because of sanctions and not being able to get
No,
components or something.
no. This was a virus found on Kojima Industries, one of their file servers, actually.
Maybe they were just trying to
Yeah. There
shift the
are
blame.
Yeah, there are a whole bunch of companies having issues with sanctions, but that's predominantly for trade with Russia. This
Yes.
is Toyota on as a whole in Japan, and their extended supply network. And I don't
It
know.
is crazy because like everything is in super demand at the moment, especially
Yeah,
cars.
yeah, and I don't know if you guys know very much about the way that Toyota actually conducts its manufacturing.
I've heard a lot of different things, especially about the way they used to do it, where they had like several thousand subsidiaries who supplied individual parts throughout the country.
The most memorable story I remember about Toyota manufacturing is that they have individual parts per country
Yeah,
because they test stuff in different environments. And after 5,000 vehicles driving for 5,000 hours, they determined that X part needs to be 2 millimeters thicker in this country because of bad road conditions, etc., etc.
yeah.
So I
So
remember one of their engineers was giving a talk on Reddit
okay.
about how they do their manufacturing and testing.
Yeah, that's cool. I think the most famous thing that they're known for is in the house they call it their Toyota production system. The more generic term for it is just-in-time inventory management and
Okay,
continuous improvement, right? So,
sure.
do you guys know anything about JIT?
No.
Yeah, it's the reason the world like collapsed in
Yeah,
2020.
this is just it, right? So the whole concept and it evolved into lean production concepts, which is all part of operations management, right? And if you do an operations management course where you sort of planning out a workspace and a production line, they'll cover these concepts in heavy detail because the way it's supposed to work is that you don't hold much inventory of anything. You basically want a continuous input and a continuous output of your products, and those products must ship once they've been made. So it must all get made pretty much same day or as close to same day as you can get it, and then sent out of your factory to wherever the buyer is going to be down that next stage of the cascade.
which is a sort of maximum profit approach to
It is,
making things.
and it has major problems when you've got big. One of the main sort of hallmarks of it is that it requires certain things in place for it to actually work well, right? So
And
you need
like one of the things I heard is it does work well, right? But provided everything keeps going
that's
well,
it. Yeah, that's it. So you need
and yeah,
you need reliable supply of your components because otherwise manufacturing literally stops that sort of second. You're not keeping inventory of your spares or your components, which is in this case exactly what happened, right?
yeah, and
It's
there's
going to
there's
have
no
an
there's
knock-on
no
effect.
there's no scale for just increasing production as well in that sort of system
Well,
because
it's
you're sort of running at the limit most of the time, right? And you kind of
not
tuned it to the economy you're sitting in.
not really. It's a little more integrated than that, as far as I understand it, especially for a company like Toyota. So remember, its suppliers are part of the Toyota group, right?
Sure.
So they need to network and be in continuous communication, basically talking about how much production they need to scale to for that very near term future, right?
Yeah.
And then, so for example, in this case, if Toyota needed to scale up production because there was a higher demand, then Kojima would have to scale its production up to match that, right? And then obviously you've got saturation points where it's limited. So if you're in absolute demand, you're going to be probably operating either at saturation, or if they've got any form of safety margin, which would go a little bit against lean production principles, and so they probably wouldn't implement this, but I'm not too sure. Then they would sort of dial it back just a little bit so that they could make sure that if something were to happen, they could accommodate it. But so this has led to a day's halt in production, which isn't too bad. But it relies on reliable supply. It relies on excellent and maintained infrastructure, both your corporate infrastructure as well as your sort of your external infrastructure, right? That your country would provide for you as a business. You also need to not have anything impacting logistics, and so
Yeah, I mean, so that's
in
that's the
yeah,
that's the thing you can't control, right? As the company that has
100%.
the just-in-time thing, because if there isn't enough steel to make the cars, it doesn't matter if you can scale up or
Sure.
meet the demand in your factories.
Yeah.
You won't be able to make the cars.
No, you won't. But and this is where for and I've seen this on the ground with what I do professionally quite a bit. These principles often get misapplied outside of the environment that they were meant to thrive in, right? If you're trying to apply these principles by rote, procedurally in an area that doesn't really support them, you're going to be at risk of severe damage to the business continuity would be the technical term, right?
Yeah,
Um, just because if you're not keeping stock of certain things, or if you don't have multiple workstations, for example, if something were to happen in one area or another, your risk management can't actually accommodate it. But
I think like just to give an example that people probably have come across is the inavailability of like just consumer goods in some
yeah,
cases, like Sony PlayStations.
yeah,
If they want to buy computer components like graphics cards, it's just that no one predicted the kind of demand because obviously it was kind of an unpredictable situation where everyone wants to build a computer because they're working from home,
yeah.
and so there was never any effort put into being able to scale up production to the degree it would be necessary to provide that sort of hardware, right?
Yeah, I
And,
mean,
and
there
so like
were
we sit like 2 years later with industry still just desperately trying to catch up.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, there've been notable instances in the past, and very often prior to the pandemic, they were attributed to sort of the kind of act of God concept, right? So you'd have hurricanes affecting Taiwan, and then that affects sort of hard drive manufacturing or hard drive availability for
Yeah,
for a couple of months thereafter, and similar events in the past. And I think they've all sort of been teed up to these events that you can't really control, and then you have something like this, which is also an event that you can't necessarily control, but you should. There still needs to be some form of adaptation to try and accommodate for it.
I think like critically, like the problem with this is once everything goes back to more or less a sort of normal, I think these companies will go back to that just-in-time supply style, just like they were before. I think this will
Yeah.
only ever change if like a government organization, makes a law that requires them to have adequate stock or something like that.
Yeah, provided
Which seems unlikely.
provided there's not another substitute event that causes issue in terms of logistics trains, right? Especially in a globalized market. But
Which is probably going to happen.
The other aspect to this, which is also something corporations are kind of behind the curve on a little bit, is the cyber aspect. So, like it or not, cyber warfare is it's emerged as its own domain, and it's really starting to be showcased a lot more recently. So attacks like this, I think you can see how easy it is to assault a corporation when you indirectly, and how much effect it can actually have on it, right? All you have to know is where a critical supply chain is, and then you can find the weak link along that chain. And you know that if they're utilizing just-in-time principles, for example, and they're utilizing them quite heavily and they're relying on it quite heavily, you can do a lot of damage quite quickly. And being, cyber being as it is, it's a lot more anonymous than other corporate saboteuring processes, right? And so
Right.
I think companies are going to have to really change and adapt how they actually treat and deal with this kind of threat that's starting to emerge now.
Yeah. Well,
it's one of those things.
Hopefully people will figure out how to do something about it, but I'll wait and see. Moving on to like another economic related thing. The Japanese comic market grew by 10% from the previous year. So manga, magazines, and such like that grew by 10% in Japan.
Really?
This is just the normal printed publishing industry. In 2022, growing by 10% from the previous year.
What? And I mean,
it's crazy, growing. Isn't it?
Yeah,
it's madness. Yeah,
especially since the population hasn't been. That's not matching, right? The population growth isn't matching that at all.
Yeah, Japan lost 400,000 people last year.
So your relative growth in terms of readership is actually going up. It's more than just the 10% if you think about it, right?
I mean, it might be other people outside of Japan also buying, manga.
I kind of personally feel like that's a fact.
Yeah,
okay, I mean, so we're just talking about sales.
Yeah, we're just talking about sales in Japan.
But just in general, the publishing industry in Japan increased by 3.6% in 2021.
Sure.
And, every other publishing industry in the world is either plateaued or declining, except, I think, for India. Which I don't really understand how Japan gets away with physical items being so popular or in so much demand. I mean, it's great, though. You can buy books in Japan for almost nothing. Like,
okay,
500 yen.
Yeah.
Which is what, $5 less than that.
Yeah. Slightly under $5. Yeah.
Yeah, like $4.50 sort of price for a whole book, right? I mean, if you go to a bookstore or anywhere else in the world, you're paying probably like $20 for like a new book.
Yeah.
Even a digital copy will cost you about $20 for a new release.
But the Japanese have realized large quantity, lower price. Good.
Large quantity, lower price, and frequently published, right? Like
exactly.
Light novels published every 6 months by an author, for example.
I used to be so negative about light novels because the writing level was so low. But I've looked at the top 3 publishers of light novels, and they're raking in so much money that they are taking non-conservative business choices. Which, if you know anything about how Japan operates business-wise, is insane. They don't take risks. They don't work outside of what they know.
I mean, it
But
is risky, but at the same time, it's not risky because people just are buying the stuff at
yeah,
incredible
well, no,
rates,
I
though,
mean,
right?
but they're doing stuff like, for example, not Good Smile. I think it's called Good Smile. I might be wrong about that name. Sorry. Good Smile is one of the companies. They've started to fund VTubers back when VTubing was not a thing. You know, like it existed, but it wasn't popular. Good Smile
Sure.
went all in. They created Nendroids, they created figurines, they created bloody cutlery sets. Cutlery sets
Well, Good
of
Smile is
VTubers.
Good Smile is a toy company, right? So
Yes, so Good Smile makes memorabilia of popular culture.
Yeah.
they also they do make anime and
Going
publish.
into it
Yeah.
was not a thing,
Yeah.
or at least not a significant thing, let's say, rather. They went all in and they made millions. But if you know how Japanese companies operate, no chances. In Japan, still use the fax machine because changing that would change how they do business, and they're not into that.
They've actually just passed a law to discourage companies from continuing to use fax machines in Japan.
Yes.
They've also passed another law discouraging people from using hanko, which are these little stamps you carry around
Yes.
with you
Yeah.
To replace your signature.
to sign documents.
I still hear people arguing that that's not like foreign people, obviously, I mean Japanese people, arguing
Yeah,
that that's harder to fake than a signature.
yeah. I mean,
But the hanko that they're using, you go to a corner store and you buy.
yeah, you can go to what's like 100 yen stores, what they call, and buy your name in this little printed plastic stamp thing,
I
and
don't
that's
know.
what you would use. It is a thing that you might want to consider if you do have to get one in Japan, getting one made by
Yeah.
a like licensed person who makes them, so that they can always replace it for you. Because if you
Hmm.
just do go and buy one at a 100 yen store and you lose it, and you can't find that exact same one, you're going to have so much trouble with banks and cell phone
Yeah.
companies, and because they want that exact image of that stamp. So it has to be the exact same thing. It's not like a signature, which just has to be like close enough, whatever.
Hmm.
So yeah, I
But they
mean,
still
yeah,
argue that the stamp is better. But like anybody who has any access to a thing you have stamped can
yeah.
go
I
buy
mean,
the
there's
same
there's
stamp.
probably literally like a million Yamadas with the same stamp, right?
Exactly.
I mean, it's not a great choice. Um, but yeah, I mean, I do. I mean, I'm generally encouraged that people still buy physical books in Japan, and it's crazy that this is still happening in like a pandemic situation. Although it must be said, part of this is that a lot of people are also buying digital copies of these things as well.
But still
But
published books.
it's only about, I think, 5% of the total of the market in Japan
Oh
is
wow.
Hmm.
digital.
Their corner
Yeah.
bookstores are popular.
Yeah,
I keep.
and they're great. You can get like 10, 12-story bookstores in central Tokyo and other big cities. And their secondhand bookstores are amazing as well. Um,
Their secondhand game stores are amazing.
there's a thing called Book Off, and they
Yeah.
have like they've got a bunch of different departments for hardware. They've got Hard Off, and there's a few other offs that don't sound good in English either. But yeah, they have it's crazy cheap to buy manga and books and stuff there, because Japanese people don't generally do that. They like buying like the new things when they
The
can,
new thing,
obviously.
yeah.
Yeah.
But at the same time, they don't want to throw out the book when they're done with it, so they will read it and then just take it to Book Off and sell it. And
Fuck
so you
off.
can buy a full set of a manga at like Book Off for 1,000 yen, like $10,
Yeah.
12 books, something like that. It's crazy cheap. I do really like that about Japan. Okay, that'll take us through the news though, and moving swiftly on, Yesh is going to give us his topic for this week.
The topic I selected was my first Japanese thing. or what it was that first got you interested and perhaps a little passionate about Japanese culture and the following of Japan as a nation, really.
I mean, that title's not quite long enough for a light novel, but it'll have to do.
We will have to manage with that. Yes.
Okay. What was your first thing, Ish? You're a little bit older than me, so maybe it'll be a bit different.
So the thing is, I didn't get into Japanese culture off of the first Japanese thing I saw, which was Dragon Ball and then Dragon Ball Z. I also didn't get in from Digimon and the assorted other things. Oddly, the first thing that really got me into Japanese culture was Generator Goal,
I don't even know what that
a
is.
slightly obscure.
Likewise. Tell
Sorry?
us. I said likewise, I don't know. Go ahead and tell us what this is, Yesh.
So
Fascinating.
Generator Goal was a manga a very long time ago, and it got adapted into a kind of not great anime, but it was the first time I had watched an animated thing try to be serious, mature, and adult about some things, while not being an edgy piece of shit.
Right.
So, Generator Goal is a high school thing where people from the future have traveled back in time to save the world from destruction that occurs in the past. And the thing they use to disguise themselves is that they are high school students and they're going through the slice of life period of time until suddenly monsters and then blood everywhere. And it was just watching something go from like, oh, great, they're going to high school. I've seen this 100 times. To wait, what's happening? Why is his arm off? Was incredible, and it fully hooked me. I'm not a gore person in particular, but the surprise of watching something try to handle violence in an adult way rather than G.I. Joe way
Yeah,
was
yeah.
stunning and interesting. I mean, my hero was actually crying and like upset that he had to hurt people, which like that appealed to me so much. And after Generator Goal, coincidentally, literally the day after, I found out that there was a channel called Toonami on which I could watch Gundam Wing and I could watch Card Captor Sakura. So, like, my taste in anime very quickly broadened very wide, as CCS and Gundam are very far apart.
This is true. Although,
Uh,
I mean, they were equally popular at the same time, I think, for
Indeed.
different
Well,
different
that's why they
audiences.
were aired together on Toonami.
So,
Um,
Dragon Ball was going on at the same time on Toonami then, I take it?
so I had been watching Dragon Ball for about 6 years prior to this.
Right.
And Dragon Ball Z, obviously, because the westernized version of Dragon Ball Z had the coolest intro song,
It
in my
does.
opinion. So I was enjoying all of that stuff long before, and Pokemon and Digimon obviously had been on air, and Beyblades. So I had watched all of these. I was actually around when in the United States the first season of Pokemon aired.
Whoa.
So I was in at the beginning of a generational mega dreadnought. I played Pokemon after I watched season 1 of Pokemon on TV, etc., etc. But none of those got me all that excited or interested about anime. Don't get me wrong, Digimon was incredible and one of the first isekai I've ever watched, I'm sure. But
Right. It's true, isn't it?
I mean, the kids go into the digital world and gain a superpower that is beyond the power of the people around them that allows them to win battles.
It's basically just Overlord, Yash.
It's basically just Overlord. Um, Anyways, ignoring how silly and wonderful that is, unfortunately, while watching those, I never really got interested in Japan. I was just interested in those shows, and I wasn't interested in shows that looked or sounded like them. I was just interested in them in particular.
Yeah, and some
I would say
strange jelly donuts that Brock was eating, but whatever.
those were some strange jelly donuts. Triangular and white? What the hell? Anyways, what actually got me interested in Japanese culture and anime in particular definitely goes to Generator Goal.
Okay.
Mm.
I mean, if I was to say what the first thing that got me interested in Japan, I mean, the first thing that I remember being distinctly aware of that was definitely Japanese was Nadesco, I think,
Hmm.
because its opening crawl, opening song was in Japanese and the closing song was in Japanese. There was no way to like get around that. It wasn't like your normal Dragon Ball Z's or your Pokemon's where they had adapted everything and dubbed it into English. So I don't know. I mean, I think the first thing I saw that was Japanese was probably Dragon Ball, the manga. Someone had left that in at school,
Oh,
and
cool.
we read through that. I'm not sure if I ever picked up on the fact that it was Japanese. Someone might have said this is a Asian comic or something.
Mm.
That's cool.
But yeah, then Sci-Fi Channel here in South Africa started broadcasting anime at night.
Yes, some very interesting anime sometimes,
I
unfortunately.
mean, it depends how late you watched, right? The anime got progressively more engrossing. I mean, as well as some other things that were a bit weirder as well. But yeah. I mean, Nadesco was one of those things that they broadcast. I can't remember what's that police drama, futuristic police one.
There's
A-
too many.
AD Police? Bubblegum
Uh,
Crisis? No.
Outlaw Star?
no, it's Dirty Pair. Dirty Pair
Dirty
Flash.
Pair. Okay.
I can't even. I know I think I've watched it, but I can't even remember the premise. To be honest,
Pair of
Yeah,
cop
so
girls,
long,
and then
so long.
conspiracy, and then bad
Uh,
ships.
Yeah,
yeah. It was just like a show of the week sort of thing, really.
yeah.
With them.
Initially, but there was a conspiracy near the very last episodes that they
Mm.
resolve. Like it was very much episode of the week kind of thing, like a criminal of the week. Except the last 6 episodes were like suddenly there's a conspiracy.
Suddenly, there's a plot line.
God, we have to cram the plot into the last 6
Oh
episodes. We never
no,
thought it would come
that's
to
the
this.
worst. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think I was definitely that, right? And then I became aware that you could acquire this anime somewhat difficultly.
Yeah.
Yes.
The internet wasn't good enough back then, or it was too expensive data wise to just download anime. Although I'm sure people with like money to spend were just doing that at that time. This was like
Mm.
1998 for me, I think,
Yeah.
somewhere around there.
Mm.
And yeah, we had like this weird flea market in the place you could go
Bruma.
to. Oh no, it was it was called
Brightwater.
Brightwater. Yeah,
Brightwater
Yeah.
Commons. Yeah.
Anime. Yeah. Anime Works. Yeah.
it, before Anime Works, there was this
Oh, really? Yeah.
dodgy flea bitten like back alley kind of place you could go to and buy these Chinese knockoff anime things. The subtitles were so bad, but they were really cheap. So you know,
Oh,
yeah, you
wow.
make some things, and then
And something
eventually,
in the 90s was that bright yellow shit with the black outline. That was pretty much international standard for fan subs.
yeah, there was yeah. I think some of them just were fan subs. That
They
someone
would almost have to be, because
had
in the
ripped and
90s,
put on
Japan
there.
wasn't exporting anime significantly.
No,
The translation stuff was very minimal.
I think they were all from Taiwan actually, not China, right? So like
Taiwan, probably,
they
yeah.
would have exported it to Taiwan because Japan and Taiwan have a good relationship, and then someone would have ripped it from a Taiwanese DVD and put some shitty fan sub kind of
Mm.
subs on there and then sold it off to the rest of the world, I guess. Although definitely by the early 2000s you could get proper
Something a little
anime.
bit more professional, yeah.
Yeah.
By 2002, 2004, Japan was like, hey, wait, there's a lot of people who want to buy this overseas.
Yeah, for
Although
sure.
I say those words, it's 2022 and they are still like, maybe the West doesn't need most of it. Maybe we can do like 5%.
Yeah, we'll just the ones we think they'll like, right?
Certain.
I mean, I think we're beyond that though. I think most things do get at least a sub.
Yeah.
Probably not directly by the Japanese company that makes them though.
No. But the Koreans and the Taiwanese are very active on translation and DVD creation.
And then I discovered actually, it's the first time I met a couple of friends of ours. They were hosting a anime screening, which is a thing that used to happen a lot.
Yeah.
Greg and Kevin, right? They had they used, I think, the school they went to or were still going to at that point. They used like the hall of that school, and
I
they
think it
would
was
do
probably
some.
a different school. I don't think they ever did it at the one that they went to,
Okay,
because
well,
I went to the same high
yeah.
school as them.
It was one actually by that Brightwater Commons place, just up the road from there.
Yes. Yeah. I think I even remember the same event that you're remembering. Yeah.
Yeah, probably we were all there and
The
just
whole like
didn't know each other.
otaku mag. I think it was an otaku mag event. If I wasn't.
Oh yeah,
not
I
correct.
remember. We used to have a
Yeah.
magazine called Otaku. Yeah.
Yeah.
After
That was
New
big.
Type went down, the English version of New Type went down. There was a whole bunch of people who had started publishing their own anime magazines.
Yeah.
Fan-created magazine,
I
basically.
think even one of our friends was kind of involved with. Didn't Vu write for Otaku?
Greg
Dark.
wrote
I
for
don't know if you remember
otaku a few
Dark.
times.
Greg, yeah.
Yeah.
So
Greg, Dark, and a couple other people
Spider-Man
wrote for
Salah, all the old crew. This is like very nostalgia
very, very long time
evoking for
ago now.
me,
Yeah.
by the way.
no, it was. I mean, it was great. Like physical media was still like a thing.
Yeah.
I still have a shelf and a half of anime and manga because of those sort of times.
Yeah.
And then shortly after that, Tokyo Pop became a thing, and English versions of manga used
Manga appearing in
appear in bookstores.
our bookstores.
So yeah, that was my introduction to it, and
Sure.
I very quickly became like kind of engrossed with the Japanese language versions of these things. I think the reason is I liked a manga called Love Hina. I don't know if you're
Lovely. Yeah. Sorry.
And
More nostalgia.
I read all of it, and then the anime came out,
Yeah,
and the American dub was fucking horrendous. It was just the worst. Like everyone had a strong, thick Texan accent in it for some reason.
Yeah.
And I was just like, no, I can't. I'm sorry, people in Texas, but
also the main girl was very screechy in the dub.
yeah. So yeah. I was decided, well, I'm just gonna watch this in Japanese. It's better. Might as well start learning Japanese.
Gosh, in the old days, dubbing, wow, it was just the worst. It actually became a sort of a fan game to figure a worse dub than X, and then we just keep telling each other different titles of descendingly worse dubs. I think I played that game with you once, Chris.
I mean, I can't think of too many awful ones anymore, I suppose, but they were none of them were great.
No, a great number of them were in
they've
fact
gotten
terrible.
better since.
Well, now there's actually an attempt at making quality ones because people have realized you can make money from this. So now companies are trying to make money.
Yeah, like Chris Sabat, the voice of Vegeta. I think he runs the American version of Funimation.
Oh, really?
What's it called?
Sure.
It's called Funimation.
Is it called Funimation? Yeah. So
although Funimation and Crunchyroll literally last week merged into just Crunchyroll, so Funimation no longer exists technically.
Oh, okay. So they had their own streaming service, didn't they?
Yes, they did.
That's
Funimation
something I might
streaming.
want to check out. I mean, I'm in favor of anime being available from one source. Provided
I would love it.
Is good enough.
But obviously, as soon as money became a thing, the one source thing died.
Indeed, sadness. But Dylan, what was your first introduction to Japanese stuff?
Okay. Yeah, so my first introduction wasn't Japanese at all. It was some really cheesy late 80s, early 90s movies that I'm sure you guys know of the ninja boom
House of the
that happened.
Sun.
Yes, I remember.
Not even, the like American Ninja, or in particular, there was a movie called The Hunted.
Three Ninjas.
Yeah, Three Ninjas, that kind of deal.
Yeah.
A lot of those movies I probably shouldn't have been watching at the age that I was watching them at, but I did anyway, and that sparked an interest in it. I think the thing that continued the interest on though was, directly after that, my first actual brush up with something that was legitimately Japanese was probably karate at primary school.
Okay.
Something I didn't really connect with very well. The Japanese culture didn't really get transmitted directly
No, when you've
to a
got
great extent.
yeah, when you've got like Sensei Dan, it's
Yeah,
difficult.
yeah, but and not only that, I mean, they did go over regularly to Japan, but it just culturally didn't really have that kind of lesson coming through. But later on in high school, stuff started to flourish a little bit more. So I have vague memories of mecha anime where the mecha were wearing cowboy hats, type of deal, right? And I've never really put my finger on
What that was.
which specific thing that was. I tried looking once, I never really got there. But it really sort of opened up when I started meeting people that were also interested in Japanese pop culture, specifically anime. And I mean, you mentioned Greg, you mentioned Kevin. They, Gavin, a whole group of people, and it started getting even a little bit more mainstream popular as well with Dragon Ball Z. But I've got fond memories of high school where would borrow sequentially, like you were talking about the late night TV shows. I think it was on a channel that I might not have had access to or something. And I remember Greg would record the anime set, so he'd watch it first, and then the VHS would make its way around, right?
Me and Greg have talked about this. We still have our Sci-Fi Channel VHSs of those
It's
things.
great. And so Dragon Ball Z was the big mainstream thing. We'd sit just as a group of people, not like even core hardcore enthusiasts, just general school kids raving about the latest episode and its cliffhanger.
Yeah, I remember
But
in my school we used to literally like run to the person's whose house was closest, so we could sit down at 4 p.m. and watch that Dragon Ball
you see,
episode come through.
my house was the one that was closest, but I didn't tell anyone, so I just ran there by myself.
Oh,
But yeah, where it started to get interesting for me though was with the sort of sharing of that content. So Exile Saga, but the dubbed version.
yeah.
And I've watched both.
Exercises.
I've watched both the subbed and the dubbed version, and I have to say there's a special place in my heart for the dubbed version. The jokes are just, they manage to somehow make them work in their kooky, wacky way. And I will always love it.
You know how today people say anime is getting too ecchi, and there's like there's not a distinction between just normal anime
and ecchi anime.
Yeah. I think
Yeah, and then you think back at those
I
times.
don't think people realize how.
No, they obviously haven't watched a lot of the stuff from like the 90s and late 80s. Hey, that stuff's like
Exo Saga holds one of the honors of being banned from actual TV for good reason, I think, for some of its stuff.
But yeah, I mean,
it's not what is that, interspecies reviews, but
yeah,
there's some bad stuff in that anime. I recommend watching it though; it's a lot of fun.
I will always have fond memories of it personally. It's just great, and I love the English dub version. But that sort of knocked on to some more famous titles. So when we did, the VHS sort of procedure happened first. That would go around, and then we all started buying our own anime DVDs from Anime Works at the time. I think there were a couple. There were one or two places that were.
Do you remember a guy called Byron?
No.
I do.
I remember Paul. I used to. I'll tell you about that now.
Paul I remember Paul as well, but Byron used to just sell anime DVDs and manga out of his house.
Oh, really?
And I mean, he's
You want some anime?
it felt like that. I used to walk there with my
Oh no.
my what do you call it, like pocket money, and I'd spend all my money on manga and whatnot that you couldn't get anywhere else.
Oh wow. So when I was like 15 or 16, I started going to the flea market that you're talking about. Anime Works, before they had an actual store, they were resident in the flea market. They actually had two locations of the flea market. One was for their gaming section where they sold games, and the
Yeah.
other was for anime. And I would hang out with Paul because he would be working, I think, on a Saturday or a Sunday. I can't remember which day it was. And I would hang out with him because he was quite a good artist, and I was trying to learn how to be an artist, diligently ignoring the fact that I had zero talent for it. I really am not good at illustration. I've never been good. No matter what I did, I never really got better. But it was still fun, and I still enjoyed it heavily. So we would sit, and there'd be anime playing in the background that we would watch. Well, we actually wouldn't sit; we'd be standing because there were no chairs, right?
Yeah.
And we'd be, he'd be doing his best to kind of guide his little, kohai into how to draw, and probably he was probably being very polite in criticism, because it was pretty horrendous. But where that kind of developed onto was that in my sort of circle of friends, we'd each buy a different DVD, whatever the case might be, and then we would share them across. So we'd watch them, and then we'd give them, pass it along and share. So Gavin, for example, owned his box set of Evangelion. We would watch that. Greg owned Trigun. We would watch
Right.
that. And I think I purchased Ninja Scroll and X were my first anime that I ever bought, the movies.
Yeah.
And thereafter, that's when sort of the emergence of Otaku Mag kind of came in, and there were the forums that we would all kind of lurk on, discussing Japanese pop culture, sort of in our own siloed group. And there were a lot of events that we attended where they would have anime screenings. And there was almost like a mini cult following for some of the personalities there. But they were all very cool, very fun guys.
Yeah.
And
Almost always just guys, though.
yeah, either
Especially at
that
that time.
or
It did. There were like a few girls who
there were a
also
few
just.
goals, but yeah, I mean that had its own problematic facets to it, because highly masculine environments tend to have that kind of weird dynamic where there are only a few girls. It's not a normalized thing, and
If anyone's
people
watched
don't know how to behave.
like the first season of Genshiken, that is basically the kind of people we're talking about here. And I
Yeah,
love all those people, but it's understandable why
to
there's so few
a
girls in
degree, yeah.
those clubs. But I also got interested in like drawing.
Mm,
I actually got into university on an art scholarship,
cool.
so I really loved like drawing manga. I used to pause the TV um, when I was like watching like Dragon Ball or something, and then I'd
Yeah.
like trace over, so I could
Oh,
get an
really?
idea for how like how to draw Goku's neck and things like that.
And then you were like, "This isn't a human neck at all.
No,
This isn't a human face."
this is just meat. Goku is just made of meat and nothing else.
Oh gosh.
But I actually, yeah, I copied like an entire volume of Naruto. I always
Oh
figured
wow.
that's just the best way to learn how to draw a style of art, is just to
Yeah.
copy things in the beginning before you get into it.
Oh man, the manga craze. That was more sort of beginning of university for me. Hanging out
That
in
was
the
definitely a high school thing for me. Yeah.
PC pools, what we would call the PC pools, common use centers.
All right. Yeah.
Just reading
Yeah.
them instead of doing whatever we needed to do.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
All the scanlation sites and such before access started becoming blocked.
Mm.
Oh man. But yeah, And then the sort of the last step there was actually getting involved with arts that had a lot stronger connection to Japan, and then going myself for the purpose of actually learning those disciplines. And that's it. It's now more of a normalized thing for me. So,
I mean, how did it develop for just everyone here that for you guys? Like, did you ever at some point just realize, oh, this is like maybe an addiction or something I'm obsessed with?
You are talking like I'm a healthy person.
Right. I get maybe we're not the most normal people in the world, but that's fine.
No. My anime, I'm not going to call this an addiction. My anime love developed while I was on 4chan.
4chan. Oh dear.
Because of 4chan, I watched Evangelion, I watched Trigun, I watched Princess Mononoke. So they introduced me to great stuff. But they also introduced me to a very unhealthy mindset about liking things. Assorted swear words. Yes, sorry.
Like, were you like a geek before anime?
Yes, absolutely, 100%. I was a computer nerd before I got into anime.
Well, maybe I was a bit of like a computer geek, but I don't think I was like I would have identified as a geek or a nerd before I started watching anime. I think
I played D&D. I collected card games.
Likewise.
I read books all the time, fantasy especially.
I think mostly I did art stuff, and then I played like quite a few computer games.
See,
I think
I'm the generic nerd in the American high school TV show.
Yes, you're not white enough. I'm sorry.
No.
Generic nerd doesn't have to be white. They can be the off-color cast for.
Yeah, that's discrimination, Chris. Jeez.
It is discrimination, but he wanted to be the standard one.
You'd be the interesting one, Yesh. That's why we're friends with you.
Yeah.
Oh no.
He's definitely one of the archetypes of the standard, like, troop of American nerds.
See, I self-identified as a nerd earlier on, but I feel like I fit into a crack at the moment because I feel like for the normal people I know, I'm definitely, a nerd or whatever word you want to describe to it, Japanese pop culture fanatic. And yet when, I know several people who are really hardcore into it, and I kind of consider you two to be in this category where I feel like I don't follow these things to that degree. And so I kind of fit in this null space between where I'm either, depending on who's looking at me, I am either way into that spectrum or I'm way out of it, it's just one of those things. But I'm not fazed by it at all. I just navigate what I feel like navigating at the time.
I think the reason I may have ended up being nerdy is because I watched Genshiken. And then
a little bit of hero worship there.
Well, yeah, I read Genshiken, I suppose.
In the 90s, I read DC and Marvel comics and pretended to be fans of both on the internet so I could argue against the other side.
You've obviously got like the genes for nerd in you, Yesh, but I think I had to be converted a bit. But I think once I had read Genshiken, I was like, yeah, I want that. I want to know those people. And like immediately when I went to university, I was like, yeah, I gotta find my club.
And you found them.
I did indeed. I found all those people.
Oh, no.
I mean, to the point we've had conversations about who is who.
Yeah. But I remember when that started. Holy moly. The concept was never going in that direction, by the way. When it started, it was thoroughly, that torch was taken on in good spirit by the next generation.
Sorry, just about who's who in Genshiken to talk about that for a second. So Chris, remember there was an episode where the main nerdy guy, who's sort of the butt of the joke in the beginning of the series at least, attends a con with a broken leg or broken hand.
Yeah, I remember that.
Madarame, yeah.
Madarame, yeah. I attended a LARP session with a fever.
Yeah.
I do remember that.
I recall. Yeah.
Oh yeah. By the way, if you didn't know, like we're just the lowest of the low. Geeks. We laugh. We play D&D.
Somewhat reformed for some of us.
I keep digging, man. There's no bottom to this hole.
Yeah.
Yesh has got into VTubers. It's
yeah, that's
I
true.
actively
That's
watch
true.
VTubers. No, it's even worse. I dual screen VTubers and the ISS camera feed.
Oh dear God.
Oh, that's cool.
That's the
super
response,
relaxing.
right?
I mean, I just love the meeting of those two things, right? like you're watching this like super energetic, really poppy Japanese subcultural phenomenon, and then you're also watching the ISS at the same time.
It's great. It's very relaxing.
I'm sure it is. I would probably never be caught dead doing that, but you know.
Yeah, I don't know.
I get it. Like everyone has their own sort of things they do. In terms of just getting into that weird anime space, though, I think when I started really being obsessed with anime was because I could copy hard drives worth of anime and like take it home.
Yeah.
And I think Greg is to blame for that because
LANs. Oh my word, the
LANs, yeah.
amount of sharing at LANs. I mean, obviously now we're getting into odd territory, but damn.
Back in the day, before there were
Back in the
licenses
day.
for anime outside of Japan,
Yeah.
people used to share this stuff wildly. Of course, this has been completely clamped down and is
that
somewhat
and
more
viruses.
impossible nowadays.
Viruses.
Oh yes, viruses.
Also, I don't think people do LANs so much anymore.
So dirty. Yeah, I know, but I mean that also adds to the nostalgia of it, right? Because that is a bygone era. You know, that's not happening anymore. No one's bringing their like their CRT monitor in the back of the car, like lugging that up a flight of stairs to whoever's house, finding a space that isn't cooking or smell bad or case might be, and then like slowly setting it up. And there's just this very like now looking back at it, very unsafe amount of electrical distribution density coming from like one or two wall sockets and several extension cords to so many machines.
Oh god, those spaces smelled so bad.
Yeah. And you always take a break at like 4 a.m, walk outside. Just
the
like
biggest mistake you can make is walking outside, because as soon as you walk back in, you have to reacclimatize.
Yeah, that's it. And that's what quitters do, right? Yeah.
That's why I stayed inside the whole time.
Oh, no.
Let my nose die.
Someone's eating like some weird sausage or something. And
No. See, I don't have nostalgia for that. That's just...
The kid who put like raw garlic on top of his chips and heated it.
No. Yeah, no. Why? Why would someone know? Oh, man.
It's to toughen you up, Dylan. It's to toughen you up.
They were like the Takamag guys did organize some LANs that were in really open areas, right? Like sort of halls and that kind of deal, and that worked well. In those days, you didn't need to really sleep for 48 hours. You could carry through. That was fine. There's nothing wrong with that.
But I also think just the sort of false rarity of anime at that point was something that also made me watch it. Like you would get like 500 gigabytes of anime from someone, right? And then you'd be like, well, I gotta watch it.
Yep.
Yes, yeah.
Keep this on in the background until I've gone through all of Naruto.
See, it was that and what was available relative to that wasn't anime, right? Like if you think about so if I think about growing up, like when I was really young, you had the best that I had, and I do love it, was the Muppets. But everything else was sort of I think we chatted about this, like Heidi or Raggedy Ann or that kind of deal, right? And then going into my teenage years, it was what are they? The Power Rangers, that kind of deal.
Oh yeah.
Right?
Sentai
stuff, yeah.
Right. And so that's where we, in comparison, that other stuff is just so much better for me.
Absolutely. And then, like, also people would curate their collections. So sometimes you'd get a collection where everything was just a banger.
So yeah, just in terms of things that were like relatively available on TV, I think anime was always better, except maybe for like Star Trek or Stargate or something like that.
Yeah,
Files, etc.
definitely.
But
See,
all of those
the other
things
stuff
which
is
would
all
air
adult.
late.
Yeah, and they were more catered towards an adult audience.
Yeah, I mean, and yeah, Japanese anime is somewhere in between adult and child.
Yeah.
And,
Indeed,
still
because I
still
think
appeals to me today, obviously.
exactly. I think it's because in Western TV they try to delineate between child and adult too much. They try to separate them
Mm.
purposefully. So you couldn't have fun in an adult show in the 90s. Which
No, I mean, which is strange because like in the 2000s, early 2000s, you started getting that a little bit more.
exactly, like with Buffy and stuff, we started to see
Buffy,
a little bit more of that. Maybe we can have fun while also being a little bit serious.
Scrubs, I guess,
Scrubs.
Psych, that sort of thing. Yeah,
Mm.
But yeah, anime definitely fill that gap in the in between where your hero could be an idiot, but also a hero, a la
yeah.
Trigun
Or there were weirder things like Golden Boy.
or Golden Boy.
I never actually watched that. Hey,
Was it too cringe?
I don't actually know it. Have I watched it? I may have just
So
blanked
the
it out.
lesson
I may
Golden
have
Boy
repressed those memories.
the lesson Golden Boy tried to teach is that effort is the most important thing. Even if you fail, effort is more important.
Also, just keep studying, man. Pinkyo,
Yeah, keep
Pinkyo,
studying, keep
Pinkyo.
improving, keep trying. Even if you fail, just keep trying. He's the Trigun of the ecchi industry.
Oh.
No, that we don't need.
Actually, it was actually a fun show. I mean,
It was a very fun
it's
show.
not really that itchy compared to
Yeah.
some things.
Well, okay. I'm gonna take a little bit of an issue with that statement.
I said
There
compared
were
to some things.
okay, fair enough, fine. Compared to some things, it isn't as etchy.
You just need to leave it open ended like that, and you can.
Compared to Rise of the Overlord, yes, it's not as etchy as such things.
I have no idea what you're talking about, Yes, it's something I've never heard of.
Compared to Bible Black, it's certainly not as.
Again, I have no clue what you're talking about right now.
See, these are like famous titles that I've never actually watched. In all honesty, and I think
I
Golden Boy
cannot
is also
recommend
in that
either of
group.
those two titles. Watch Night Nurses instead.
I had a friend in school called Li Hao, and we were just at his
Are
house
you
one day.
have names been changed to save the guilty?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah, music is Chinese name, so it will not
Oh,
be hit back
oh
soon.
no.
So he had, he was just at his house and we were like fooling around on his computer. And like I had the bright idea to just go to a C drive and hit show hidden folders.
No, why did you do this? Why, Chris? Why were you that person?
Oh, why do boys do things? It was
Oh my god.
no, it was just like a thing. I don't know. We were trying to install a game or something, and there wasn't any space, right?
Oh no.
And
Okay.
there was only like, so like 10 gigs of used space on his Windows
And you're like,
computer.
I know how to fix
What
this.
is taking up the space? I've never seen so much
High quality.
high quality research material.
Or
Damn,
science.
son.
Oh,
Oh
dear
my
God.
word. Oh gosh.
But yeah,
See,
different times.
streaming is a godsend for
High school boys.
for physical storage capacity. Streaming is a godsend.
Yeah, they can do all of their research online, and no one will ever know about it.
Or everyone. Yeah. Oh man.
Indeed.
Moving swiftly along.
Sure.
Man.
But yeah, I mean, I think it was sort of interesting growing up during that transition time from, having to sort of maybe pirate anime to get it, or, get, recorded VHSs of the thing just to be able to access it. to where we are now,
Yeah.
where it's so ubiquitous. You pay like
Yeah.
$5 a month, and you have access to unlimited anime that you can stream whenever you want.
Yeah. Yeah.
Although I have to say, like, it's still difficult to get some older shows on streaming services. You have to like
Mhm.
subscribe to like some special Amazon channel or something, which I'm considering doing for some of them. Like, I do want to watch Nadesco again. But you can access that in different ways, so it's not necessarily important to do. Yeah, but yeah, I think that'll wrap up our talk on this for today. Eh?
That was fun.
It was
Very
fun.
Lots of nostalgia packed into that.
Transitioning into like what are we watching? What are we reading at the moment? Yes.
So I managed to find a light novel that's not yet properly westernized published, but it has a manga called Triple F Class Hero that I've been reading for 5 years, and it is wrapping up this year. So I am just trying to blast my way through all of those chapters in the hopes of finishing it as soon as it finishes.
Does it sound like what it is? Like the worst hero?
Yeah, okay. Initially, he is very much the worst hero. He reaches, the introduction is that he reaches the demon lord Pedinar. Don't worry about the naming sense. But he finds out that the demon lord's strength is set to the hero's level as soon as you enter the room where you fight the demon lord. So he kills his companions after he enters, so that he levels up and beats the demon lord by levels. He kills his companions.
Damn. That's cold.
Okay.
And then it just carries on like this, and it goes on to poke holes in all of these isekai shows and stories about how heroes are just trying to aggrandize themselves and make people want to thank them. Where if you're actually trying to improve situations, you need to do X, Y, Z instead.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm okay with the kind of lightheartedness of most isekai. I think
Yes,
if you
no, it's
get into it into too much detail and too often, it becomes just depressing.
absolutely. It's just really funny to see this guy who's called a hero because he was summoned. But
Right.
unlike
Yeah.
all of the other heroes, he doesn't want to be there. He wants to go home immediately.
Yeah.
But when he gets told no, he doesn't like freak out and start crying or anything like that. Instead, he starts removing corruption from the government of the kingdom that he starts out in. And once he's weeded out the corruption, he takes the money that the corruption was initially getting for himself to power the hero's journey. And he goes to the other kingdoms and fixes them slowly until he has enough power to go fight the demon lord.
That's a very Japanese fantasy, isn't it? Like fixing corruption and things like that.
Well, I mean, it's also kind of terrible because everything he does is by not trusting people, not having a great journey with his companions, and not being in danger unnecessarily.
Yeah, no, I get that. I just, fixing other countries, right? I mean, is something a lot of like people have fantasies about. I think just in general.
Well,
Yeah.
it's definitely a power fantasy. It's still a light novel.
Sure. Yeah.
But I've been reading it for 5 years. It kept me entertained. It's got more than 400 chapters, and I've read 389 of them.
Sure. Yeah.
Oh, jeez. Well, I've moved on to another season of Gundam. Not to speak too much about Gundam though. Like as I noted, there are a lot of blonde captains in Gundam Zeta, however you say that.
Mm-hmm.
Which is very, very confusing, right? Like, please. I mean, I know it's a really old anime, but like, if you're like writing a comic or something, distinguish your characters, so I don't have to like think about is this like enemy guy or the good guy or whatever gray area they exist in Gundam worlds.
I do want to edge in here and comment that the main reason for this was so that they could share animation cells, so that they wouldn't have to animate people, because the point of the show is supposed to be the mecha, so they didn't put as much effort into the people.
I mean, these
But
aren't like
he's
background
correct.
captains. These are like the two main people so far. I mean, two
Yeah,
main
but
ships
they're the
captains.
people you'd have to animate the most. So being able to share cells with them is very useful.
I'm not sure it's even like possible because they looked kind of distinct. You know, they're all blonde, all blonde white
Yes.
guys. So they're not like they look particularly similar, right? They're definitely drawn differently. They have different hair. I'm not sure which blonde guy is which blonde guy.
Which
I
blonde guy?
guess. Um, but other than that, I continue to go through the season's anime. I've given up on a few of them, I think, and have been looking at just getting into some older anime because I've been enjoying going through Galactic Heroes and Gundam and such. But then I've also been
Yeah.
watching a bunch of Japanese live action stuff. Most of it based on anime, though. Like I've been
Which
watching live action Eurocam.
Oh, okay.
Started me off on that. And then like I was Dylan, you were talking about the Full Metal Alchemist version,
oh yeah, no.
which I don't think I'm gonna
Oh,
watch, but it does.
no,
It
the
does
trailer looks so awful for the next. That looks so bad.
The
I mean,
CGL for some reason looks like the worst thing.
it is pretty
Man.
bad. It's definitely someone just working in After Effects as
It-
best they can with a limited budget.
I mean, this is like what we're chatting about was that Rurouni Kenshin, the live actions were really well received, and I think part of that is because the anime is so old. People don't automatically compare the movies to anime, and the movies were made in such a way that they really worked in isolation like that, right? Without that comparison, they were their own thing, and they did pretty well at that. You know, it was a sort of wire work kind of action style that's popular now. But Full Metal Alchemist is a little newer. It's like a lot fresher in people's minds, and
It's
I
also like
just
a lot more visually intensive.
and yeah, 100%, right? These superpowers essentially that people are utilizing,
One guy is a
magic,
robot.
yeah, and it just doesn't work in the live action. I like, in my opinion, the trailer looks terrible. The CG looks
But yeah, the kind of anime
bad.
adaptations that do work are anime adaptations about real life.
Yeah.
So
I was
GTO
saying
works really well. The 90s version.
GTO does work well. I was saying it's mostly because we've had samurai action flicks before. So they could transfer the real world samurai action flick industry stuff over for Rurouni Kenshin.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
But
true.
the like semi-magical fantasy mid 1900s world type thing that Full Metal Alchemist is going for is new. So then you get these people who aren't being paying a lot, being paid a lot, trying to create these methods for showing it.
Yeah.
Did you try and watch the Space Battleship Yamato live action?
It's actually kind of good in a very bad way.
Yeah, it's not terrible. Which I mean, all the things we're saying, it shouldn't
It's
work.
quite punk. I thought it worked quite well, in my opinion. I enjoyed it, at least. I will say that it's not as... So I actually took Space Battleship Yamato, the anime, seriously, as like a space opera. That's a serious space opera. But the live action I took as more of a... how do I put it? Punk, almost like it's trying to make fun of the genre while taking it semi-seriously. I forget what that's called. It's not
Like a
punk, it's
satire.
something else.
Yeah, I don't know.
Almost like a satire, but like I forget what the word is. I'm sorry, but it's enjoyable. It's a good ride,
Yeah,
but
it's
it's definitely not the same genre as
it's a bit campy, which is
campy. That's the word I was looking for. Sorry,
but
it's
it's
quite
still
a
good.
campy take on Space Battleship Yamato.
It's strange. You're right. Like the anime is kind of dark if you stop and think about what is actually happening in it for more than a moment.
I feel like that's often the case with these things.
But I mean, most of the cases even with like Evangelion, you don't really like reflect on the world very much throughout the
No,
anime.
yeah.
It's mostly just about
Yeah.
the main characters. But with like
Yeah.
Yamato, you're forced to think about like the Earth has been destroyed basically, and there's just a few 100,000 people in bunkers living. That's basically the rest of humankind.
Yeah.
And they've got like one ship with one chance to save the species, sort of thing.
So it's a documentary, right?
Yeah, it's our inevitable future, except except for the Russians are played by space aliens, I guess.
Oh man.
So are we going
Oh
to talk,
man.
while we're talking about adaptions, are we going to talk about the Cowboy Bebop adaptation?
Yes, we must, right?
Yeah,
Well, I haven't.
personally think we should.
I refuse to watch. I refuse to watch the live action adaptation. Sorry.
No, that's fine. But what we can say about it is that when Netflix makes a thing, it is much better quality.
Mm.
Um, but the fact that it wasn't a Japanese production company involved means that it doesn't quite feel like anime anymore.
Mm.
Also, it felt a lot like they were trying to be very serious about adapting something that wasn't Cowboy Bebop.
Yeah. See, my problem with these things,
On yeah,
sorry, it's for anything where there's a readaptation or a remake or a live action adaptation of something, I want guys to sit down and ask themselves the question: what am I adding? What value am I adding to this this title? Right? What are we actually adding in terms of value? And if the answer is there's not much to add, then move on and find something else.
yeah, but money, right?
I
It's all
feel
about the money.
no, I get that, but this is what I'm. We keep learning this lesson is that people will keep doing these things and then they'll keep flopping and they won't actually make the money that they think it'll make.
Oh,
You
oh,
know,
Dylan, do you want your cynicism to explode for a moment?
my cynicism is just a dry
Before our
smoking
cynicism
husk at the
explodes,
moment.
and I'll come back to that, Yesh. I just want to bring up
Sorry.
one thing, right? There's always one minor thing that geeks like harp on about something from a show they don't like, right?
Mm,
So they'll talk about one specific character in like a really like mean way or something. Uh, on Japanese YouTube, that thing for Cowboy Bebop is that in the opening crawl of the Netflix live action thing, they've changed the writing from English to Japanese because they've obviously swapped the language, right? The
Yes,
original
yeah.
was in Japanese, dubbed into English, and this one is in English, dubbed into Japanese. So the opening crawl of the new one, has Japanese characters and not English characters anymore. And people are really fucking mad about that. Like irrationally, insanely
That
mad
is a
about
little
that.
bit irrational in my opinion. Although maybe I'm missing something.
Yeah, I don't know. It's any change is difficult for some people, I think. Obviously, the people who were making it thought that was just a funny joke, and it is kind of. But some people don't have a sense of humor, I guess.
Yeah,
Yeah, which
which is a
even
little bit sad.
maybe they're just nitpicking because they didn't make it past the the
The
intro.
opening crawl.
Oh no.
I don't think it's that bad, to be honest. I mean, it's not.
Okay,
good.
but do you feel it adds value? That's the question, right? To the franchise.
I don't think anyone did because no one watched it. So
Okay.
no. But I mean, objectively, it's not terrible. I think
I will not call it terrible.
they
I will
did
agree
some
with you there.
strange things with some characters to make them
Mm,
like more Western. Or
mm,
I think the thing with the original is that none of the characters really had. I mean, they all had an archetype, basically, right? They weren't actual
mm.
people. They were just
Sure.
your traditional Japanese archetypes following a kind of stylistic
Yeah. Yeah, that's
show.
that's the noir concepts that they're bringing
Right,
to
yeah,
it, right?
that's space noir, the bebop kind
Mm,
of part of it, right?
yeah. And in
Well,
noir, you pretty much only have archetypes. Yeah.
it wasn't a serious show, and so everything had to be driven by those character archetypes
Mm,
to keep it moving, to keep the story moving.
yeah.
But the Netflix show wanted to make those people more real, which I think drags the tone down to a point where you can't appreciate the
Uh,
style anymore.
yeah, and that was one of the main driving
Points of
contributions of the anime is the style, the intersection, the jazz that's overlaid over everything. Like, sorry,
I
we're
think
not going
like
to go into this.
I think the characters
no,
actually
exactly.
were too competent as well in
Ugh.
the Netflix version.
Oh, yeah, man.
Because in the anime they're all screw ups. They fail
in
more
some
than they
ways.
succeed.
And they're always broke and in debt and on the verge of starvation.
Each of them have like one thing they can do, right?
Yep.
Like, I mean, some of them are really not good with a gun, but
Yep,
they're good
yeah.
at talking or something like that.
Yeah.
And so,
But also, you can feel through the entire series that the director is in love with this gangster storyline of Spike's past.
right,
So it
yeah.
keeps intruding on a good
Yeah.
story. We stop a good story to go look at Spike's past often.
Are you
Yeah.
talking about the live action or the anime now?
The live
Live
action.
action.
The live action.
In the
Yeah.
live action, they bring Spike's past as flashbacks and flash forwards all the time.
Yeah.
They interrupt the action of episodes to talk about these people that are off screen.
Do you remember Dark
Ugh.
Matter?
I do, yeah.
It feels like maybe someone who was involved with Dark Matter got involved with
Suppose
scripting.
that's kind of true, but Dark Matter, at least it felt, oh no, I suppose in the beginning it was kind of terrible.
But I mean, Dark Matter was set up as like, backstory was important sort of thing. That's the whole point
Yes,
of it, right?
yeah.
Is discovering your backstory.
Exactly.
So,
And
I mean,
after
it
the
kind of
first couple of
works.
episodes, they started to weave it in really well.
Yes, yeah. And that was the interesting part of Dark Matter. Interesting part of Cowboy Bebop is just going to weird places and people failing in kind of humorous ways.
Exploring the flaws in our heroes that seem heroic initially, and then you get to know them.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
But in this, we start out knowing that they're all broken, and we keep flashing to how broken they are.
No, it was. I mean, it was a good attempt. I like the quality of it. I think they miscast almost all of the people quite badly, but I mean the production quality looked really good.
Yeah, I mean,
I think the sets were
Netflix
great.
productions are generally good quality. It's just
They can vary, but yeah.
I had
select
more of a problem with the scripting.
Yeah,
The fact
select
that we
your
never
story.
had even action was a big problem for me. Sorry, Dylan, I want to make your cynicism explode for a moment. Now that we have come to that conclusion. So Square Enix released a game yesterday, called Babylon's Fall, and it got very bad reviews. And they had an emergency conference to determine what could be called the primary reason for this, because they actually invested a lot of money into this game.
Mm.
Do you know what the conclusion they came to was?
They didn't invest enough money?
No, the conclusion they came to was, it turns out, unfortunately, that a game might need to be fun for it to sell. We did not take that into account during development, so this game will not perform well until we fix core systems, because we didn't have the plan for it to be fun initially.
Just like go on a slight tangent about games, though. Like there's this principle in programming. I can't remember what it's called, but where you only do the most important things first, right? And you get everything like running.
Yeah,
And I think a lot of game companies just do that with their game, so it's functional, and so they can get it released as quickly as possible. And I noticed, like, even in like Age of Empires 4, which is, you would suppose would be quite a big title, being sponsored by Microsoft and all, and it being a successor to 3 other game series in that it would have been tested and it would have been balanced and it would have been a complete full game on launch, but it wasn't.
No, Chris, you're expecting a game to be fun. Companies have decided that's not important.
But I mean, that was also part of the problem. Because it wasn't balanced, it wasn't fun to play initially. I mean, they've since fixed it mostly.
So, like I'm trying to tell you, EA and Square Enix have both come out with official statements. By the way, EA recently messed up a Battlefield launch.
Yeah.
They have both recently made statements where they said that the player experience was not what they considered at all during production.
It was like hundreds of thousands in petition asking for a refund for Battlefield.
Battlefield.
I was like, it's hilariously bad.
2 of the biggest game producing companies have come out officially saying player experience is not on their mind at all during production.
Yeah.
It is not a consideration.
Sure. There is also, on top of this, the sort of emergent problem that a lot of games are kept in early access mode and released in early access mode specifically so that they're not forced to
create a functional game.
Well, not really that. They're not forced to keep service support for software updates that are system software updates, essentially, right? Because when you
Mm.
release, apparently, this is what I've heard, when you release a game and you release it as a final made product, say there's a Windows update and you've got to now update your game to function correctly with this thing, you've now got to continuously release patches. But if it's in an
Yeah.
early release mode, you're not held to that standard.
No, there's no
And so
obligation legally for you to do anything.
it's like created this, there needs to be a third category where like early release should just be like, beta testing, whatever you want to call it. Then early release is early release where you don't have that support. But anyway,
Yeah.
there's a whole bunch of problems in the industry that
I say to
will
Microsoft's
come to a
credit,
head.
they never did an early release for Age of Empires 4, and they did a lot of beta testing. But obviously, it wasn't. I mean, one gets the feeling that there's very few people that actually work at game companies nowadays.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
And
Sorry, Chris.
there aren't enough testing staff to like get games properly polished.
To crush your hopes about AoE getting tested or being treated well, I'm going to remind you that Dungeon Keeper and Red Alert were both very successful multi-series games that have both been crushed by shitty releases and bad support. Simply because more cash if we don't have to think.
Dungeon Keeper? Which release was?
So Dungeon Keeper got released as a mobile-only.
No, but I mean that I didn't even register that as being a PC game because it's not a PC game.
The crazy thing about Red Alert is like there's no plans to remake Red Alert 2.
No, there isn't. They released a mobile game for it, and they said that it. Sorry, what was the wording? It performed poorly, so we believe there is no interest in Red Alert, and thus are closing down this development branch.
If they remade Red Alert 1, it would be.
They did. They remade and remastered Red Alert 1. So we were all expecting Red Alert 2 to get like a similar treatment.
Oh, okay.
But they released a mobile game for Red Alert instead.
Oh no.
And the mobile game performed badly, so they shut down production of Red Alert 2 Remake.
And I mean, talking about like some cool Japanese pop culture, like Red Alert 3's like Japanese Empire thing. I mean, that's as poppy as you can get. I love that like cringy stuff. Your mechatanks transforming like planes into mechs and things.
6 energy.
Yeah, right. But yeah, that's all I've been up to, I guess.
Excellent.
Me, I haven't. So this week's been a bit busy. I haven't really got any Japanese pop culture stuff to talk about. I've basically in my off time I've been playing a little bit of Project Zomboid because we're going to play with friends, and I need to orient myself to that game very quickly, which is a little bit of a headache. But a fun one to kind of try and wrap my mind around. I've been doing that. Same old with training. I've been watching a really good series. I think that's been out for a while now, called Archive 81.
Okay.
Highly recommend that as a horror series for people.
All right, I did see that pop up in my feed the other day.
If you're a horror fan,
I am such a wimp. I can't do horror.
Really?
Yeah. No, it's bad.
Yeah, then I would say steer clear because they do it very well. They do slow burn horror very well. They don't abuse jump scares. So yeah, it's been fun. But yeah,
there was a movie called They. I can't remember, back in the early 2000s. I mean, it kept the bedside night on for me for a good like 7 years. I think.
Oh really?
Watching it. Yeah. I don't like horror.
Yeah.
I watched it when I was 8, and that ruined me for a solid 3 or 4 years.
I had it described to me.
Ruined.
I never watched it.
Yeah, clowns are always a priceless one.
Yeah.
Witches, Roald Dahl's Witches, the movie adaptation of it. For some reason, I was really young when I watched it. That freaked me out. But horror doesn't normally freak me out too much.
I mean,
psychological disturbia is stuff that I find more disturbing.
No, I mean, I think it is that for me. It's not like gore or violence or anything for me that freaks me out. it is just the idea of some of these horrific monsters and their magical abilities that kind of freak me out. Like with that there is this, darkness realm wherever you turn the light off, and these monsters live in shadows that you can't see them in. So it's like they're always there around you is like the implication, right?
Yeah.
And like they randomly mark some people for like harvesting or something at some point in their life.
Oh, wow.
Is like the thing, and they can only get you in the dark though. So that's the premise of the movie, I guess.
People always sleep in the light until the
Right.
lights go off.
Right.
Nom 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 nom.
Indeed.
Yeah.
No, that's the thing that gets me with some of these things. It's just being unable to stop thinking about the implications of them, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay, but I think that'll do it for us today. Thanks for listening, everyone. Thank you, Yash. Thank you, Dylan.
Thank you. This
Thanks,
was
guys.
awesome. Love it.
And we do actually have a website called thejapanophile.com, where you can go and access some written articles about Japanese stuff. Bear in mind, we're just starting out, so there's only a few, but you can see my thoughts on learning Japanese there, thoughts on Konosuba, and Yojo Zenki coming up very shortly as well. All right. Thanks, everyone, for listening.
Thanks.
Yep.
Cheers.
Thanks. Bye.